A few days ago I posted a video comparing the iPhone 16 Pro with the Vivo X100 Ultra in terms of daytime comparison when it comes to photography and a little bit of video as well. But today's video is all about low light photography. Let's find out how the iPhone stacks up against one of the better ones out there, the Vivo X100 Ultra. Now for this first shot, the bridge of Arnhem, and yes, we will get to the UFO invasion in a bit. But looking at the shot itself, I've noticed that while it still sharpens after the update, it isn't to the degree that we had before the update on the iPhone. Now both in terms of colors are pretty similar, but the bridge stands out more on the Vivo and it has less border of lens flare on the right side where a light source was. And unlike the iPhone, we don't have that alien invasion in the sky itself, which yes, hasn't been fixed at all. Both though have a bit too much artificial softening going on in the shot itself, especially noticeable when you zoom in quite a bit. Now in this shot both didn't do the best in terms of color, but it's closer on the Vivo itself by some margin. But I like how we have a dark tree the way that it should be on the iPhone, where on the Vivo we do not, removing the feel of night, something that I've discussed before when it comes to Vivo and that feel of night missing. But both have a problem. The iPhone of course has that UFO invasion that we know from iPhone, but when it comes to the Vivo we have this weird effect on the light itself, this weird purple to red color shift going on there. In this shot, at first glance, I think the shots look quite similar in terms of colors on some parts, yet also very different at the same time, with more saturation going on the Vivo, and the sky does look darker on the iPhone, which has my preference. But Vivo looks easily more detailed out of the two, with less noise going on as well. Now this is one of the fanciest outside McDonald's that I know, and again I would say I think that the Vivo does a bit too much, making everything visible. That feel of night just isn't there, but of course that comes down to preference, and that's something that I enjoy, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I feel like technically it's a bad shot at all. It's just my preference to have that feel of night. Now while the iPhone does have that better feel of night, it feels very flat. Colors are a bit crushed on the iPhone, and when zooming in, while the Vivo is a tad too sharp, it's also more detailed out of the two with less noise, even though I don't think the noise is too bothering on the iPhone here. Now with this water fountain, it's a bit harder for me when it comes to both of these shots. The Vivo for me has a bit too much sharpening going on, and the colors are a bit too much in terms of saturation, but the sky is nicer and it's more detailed as well. And with the water fountain itself, it captured it very well, where the iPhone is struggling with the balance of the light source. What I think the iPhone did better though is the colors of the road. It's more like that in reality, and the blue bricks as well, combined with a bit less sharpening going on. Detail wise though, again of course clearly the Vivo is doing a better job here. Now with this one, some notes again. I think that the darker spots again are done better on the iPhone, again giving that feel of night better compared to what we get on the Vivo. That being said though, the dynamic range is better on the Vivo, it's more detailed as well, and the warm colors are far better done on the Vivo as well. Close to what we are really seeing, especially if we look inside the restaurant itself. It's just closer to what it really was, and it definitely captured that better. Now when it comes to low light and the main sensor in general, capturing shots on both of them are very different. I will give a compliment to Apple where it deserves it, and that is that it captures the feel of night better, with the darker spots being handled properly, trees being darker and so on. Where on the Vivo it does try to make everything bright, and for my own taste, which is a preference thing, I feel like it misses out on that feel of night. Now with that being said, with the main sensor in general, I think the iPhone is a bit inconsistent with the colors itself. Sometimes it can really crush the colors on the main sensor, depending on the shot that you're taking. In terms of noise and details, the Vivo easily wins here most of the time. Not to mention, while we had one light artifact going on with the Vivo with that weird color shift, the iPhone often has that UFO evasion going on in the shots itself, where the Vivo doesn't.
So, for the camera after the update itself, of course we got to test it again and see if this new update made any improvement in terms of the camera. So far on the phone it definitely seems like it has a good upgrade in comparison, but we're gonna find out on the PC itself, because on the phone it's a small display, you never know, on a big display. The thing I did notice is that with the ultra wide, while we don't have the smudges anymore, in some cases it can be quite dark in comparison.
So now we come to the segment where it failed catastrophically. in low light performance, but mainly the ultra wide. And this section I kind of want to highlight because simply put, there is an update and it definitely made changes when it comes to the performance itself. Now after taking the shots itself and looking at it on my PC, try to see if I brighten it up a little bit, what the difference is, I noticed a few things. One, the images are quite a bit darker compared to what it was before. Before it really tried to push that brightness up, therefore having a higher ISO and more noise in the shot itself when it comes to the ultra wide. But in comparison, what you got was those spotches, those weird spotches that had noise to them and black parts to them. It just looked really weird when it comes to the shot and simply not acceptable for a phone that you pay that much money for. But when it comes to the updates now and how it proceeds now, the images as stated are quite a bit darker. Those spotches aren't completely gone though, they're still there, but they are more hidden. What I also noticed is when it comes to the ultra wide now, colors are a bit more crushed depending on the shot itself because it's trying to hide the imperfections that it had before by brightening up the shots. If I brighten up the shots as stated, I still get some of those effects that I had before. But because they are darker, they are more hidden. So if you want to edit those shots, that becomes quite hard on shots like these when using the ultra wide on the iPhone 16 Pro. And it's something that I wanted to highlight and showcase the difference between how it approached it before versus how it approaches it now after the update. So the hell of the ultra wide on the iPhone, starting with this shot. Again, there are some improvements on the iPhone 16 Pro, but that's more down to not having those smudges as visible. But that doesn't mean that it's good by any means. In this shot, for instance, see how much noise is going on the building, but yet softening as well, losing a lot of detail that the Vivo managed to capture. The iPhone is simply very, very, very poor when it comes to this shot, and also some color crushing going on. Now with this shot again, see the big difference in terms of quality. This is not going to be a battle between the two when it comes to the ultra wide. Forget the whole preference thing where I wanted to capture the feel of night. All of that goes out of the windows if the colors are so badly crushed, if you have so much issues with light sources. And yes, I did clean the lens because I do that almost every shot, but the iPhone looks like a mess, like there's a filter on top of it, with so much weird softening going on. And again, a very poor performance of the iPhone, and here it's not even close. It's a rarity to get a shot on the iPhone with the ultra wide that actually looks decent. Sure, it loses out here in terms of dynamic range compared to the Vivo, with much more bloom going on in comparison. But this shot isn't anywhere near as poor as some others that I've taken on the iPhone 16 Pro. But that should tell you the state of the ultra wide and its performance, where with this kind of shot, I'm pleased that I managed to capture something. It's a shocker where I'm actually surprised that I managed to capture something that is actually decent on the ultra wide. Both though, in terms of the shot itself, kind of failed at delivering that night feel, and the greens are too saturated on the Vivo itself. Now here, to begin with, we're gonna ignore the obvious noise smudge going on. And the feel of the shot I do like better on the iPhone. It really gives that moody night shot that I really want to capture, where on the Vivo it doesn't capture that warmth as well, and making the shot too bright. Yes, this is an easy fix, but I'm not here to edit shots and to make it the best out of the two itself. I'm here to showcase what both of them do in audio performance. Now of course that kind of goes out of the window when we go to the sky and have that smudge again that I thought was gone. And again, in terms of details, the Vivo is definitely better out of the two. Now this is the kind of shot that I was referring to when it comes to the previous version of iOS versus what it does now. With the previous version, it would try to make everything a little bit brighter and therefore get a shot out of it, to get something out of the shot that looks like a really terrible sensor. This means, however, that with the current update, we get very, very dark images depending on the shot itself. Yes, the night feel on the Vivo is missing, but do we need to say anything when the iPhone shot looks like this? So noisy, so dark, so soft, and making it very unusable. Look at, for instance, these points. This is not information you can ever get back. There's no data there. When brightening up the shot, you see that it has those issues. On the seats itself, on the building behind it, in the sky itself, everywhere in the shot where you see those darker patches, that's information lost. There's nothing there. It's just black. So again, when it comes to the ultra wide performance, it's simply unacceptable for the price that you are paying for it. we get way too much noise, and images coming from the ultra wide are simply unacceptable. I know I will get some defenders here about the performance of the iPhone and how I should help it by any way possible. But this is simply how the phone shoots in auto, how they stack up against each other, because most people will simply shoot in auto in reality. And the performance like this should simply not be okay, and I hope that an Apple defender would understand that. It's only in your own benefit to call out poor performance. And simply put, when it comes to the ultra-wide, it's not a very nice battle to have because of how the performance is on the iPhone itself. Yes, the Vivo doesn't capture the feel of night very well, but when it comes to the shot itself, it's far more detailed. It has far less issues with noise, it has far less issues with, of course, the light sources as well, compared to what you get on the iPhone. Now, finally, the periscope part and the last part for the stills photography side. Now, with this first shot, there are several things that you can notice. Both have a bit of noise in the sky, but the Vivo is sharper and has a faster shutter speed, as you can see on the water itself, where on the iPhone, the water stream isn't very noticeable compared to the Vivo. And the light source in the back is also controlled better by the Vivo itself over the iPhone. On this third shot, again, the Vivo is sharper and has better control of the image itself, with far better noise control, where the iPhone sky looks a bit more noisy and has small patches on it as well. And as well being brighter in terms of the sky itself, where it is quite dark here. However, I do like the darker parts on the church itself that we see on the iPhone versus what we get on the Vivo. Now, comments that I had before about the night feel, that still counts in shots like these. The Vivo just looks a tad too bright for me. It doesn't have that night feel that it should have in terms of night photography. However, the Vivo does have better dynamic range control. For instance, you can see the clock really clearly and the radar above it as well, where with the iPhone, especially the clock itself is quite blown out in comparison. In this shot, to a degree, preference matters here because of the color difference itself. But in turn, the one that was closer to reality was the Vivo with the more warmer tone that should be there. Where with the iPhone, it looks a lot flatter as well in comparison. The Vivo is also more detailed, but also has a bit more artificial sharpening put on the shot itself. I said it before, I think that the periscope when it comes to the iPhone isn't great in low light, but it can take some decent shots in between. And overall, depending on your needs for at least the periscope, it can deliver some shots in low light that are acceptable. Unlike the ultra wide, of course.
Okay, 60 above. Ground color is better on the iPhone. Zooming out. Times. Of course, there's no native 5 times on Vivo. It's 3.7 times. A lot more noise on the iPhone, but brighter in turn. UFOs are still there. Again, this ground color, that where it is better on the iPhone. Building a little bit as well in terms of colors. Again, ultra wide. At least on the phone itself, it seems like a good improvement with this update, but it needed it really badly. Vivo extreme low light, 4K, 5 seconds. UFOs, as stated, are still there. Again, hard to say what it will do when you look at it on a big screen. Five times.
So at the end, when it comes to, again, low light performance, the iPhone really falters. And it's not necessarily the main sensor that I think falters, but it's more, without a doubt, the ultra wide. The ultra wide is simply terrible. This is a phone that loses a lot of information in the shot itself. We have black spots that you cannot retrieve the information from anymore. That's a terrible performance for a phone like this. The update made some changes where you don't see the smudges anymore. And yes, in terms of low light feel, it does do better than Vivo, which I've criticized Vivo for a little bit as well when it comes to that feel of night. But with that being said, when it comes to lost information in the ultra-wide, the performance on the iPhone is simply not acceptable for a price that you are paying for this phone. I have mid-range phones that would perform better than that when it comes to the ultra-wide and that kind of information loss on the shot itself. It's crazy that this is acceptable, and it's crazy how this is rated so high by a lot of people. I do not understand it. When in low light it falters so hard when it comes to the ultra-wide. Sure, when it comes to the periscope, it's a little bit like, yeah, there's noise, there's splotches sometimes, depending on the situation itself. But I don't think the periscope is that terrible. I don't think it's good by any means, but I don't think it's terrible. But when it comes to just the ultra-wide, I think there it falters so badly. But in this comparison, even if we remove the ultra-wide, I think that the Vivo still wins. Yes, that feel of night is better captured on the iPhone, but I think that was because it wasn't able to capture more information in the shot itself. When it comes to the details in the shot itself, but also of course the dynamic range in the shot itself, here I would say the Vivo also wins over the iPhone as well. So yeah, while the battle with of course the main sensor versus the main sensor is much closer to, for instance, the ultra-wide and also closer compared to the periscope, yeah, I don't think that Apple has done a good job here when it comes to photography and especially when it comes to the ultra-wide. In low light performance, again, the Vivo surely wins over the iPhone. And yes, we can have conversations about preferences, and there are some conversations when it comes to the main sensor. But when it comes to the rest, it's not even close. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video, and of course, again, I really want to thank my members as well. I really do appreciate it. You can become a member below as well if you want to. You don't have to, but of course, it is appreciated if you do. And of course, stay tuned for more videos as well. Yesterday, I went on a ride to meet a friend of mine to take some portrait shots with several phones, so you can see, okay, how those phones perform in terms of portrait photography as well. Either way, hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to like, subscribe, and so on. And talk to you guys in the next.